Batu, Marana, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive!
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm also the regular host.
I need to change that.
Yeah.
I know, it sounds like, host and guest. It's never the case. It's just how it's always been. I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. We are revisiting a third iteration. This is a first time actually. We've done remakes, we've done sequels, and follow-ups. This is the first time we've done a third remake, I think, of a Twilight Zone episode. We are doing the 2019 version of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. We obviously covered the original with Rod Serling and Shatner in the original show. We covered the wonderful remake with John Lithgow and George Miller in the movie. And now this is the more recent version with Adam Scott and Jordan Peele. So I think we need to sort of, this is obviously for the TV show. They're now cancelled. Twilight Zone reboot.
2019.
The 2019, yeah. And this was episode 2 of season 1. So I have to say, I didn't know that this existed. You're the one that sort of pointed it out to me. But to have this as your episode 2 of season 1 does kind of say, they didn't have 100% faith in what they were doing, and they were going for something that was catchy and would get people's attention to get people onto the show. So, I could be wrong, but that's just how it feels. Anyway, this is...
I don't mind that. I mean, they got to get attention somehow, but it's more the choices that we'll discuss.
Well, let's get into it. So originally, we obviously know that the original story is, in both cases, is a nervous nervous flying passenger. He's on a plane, and a storm sort of sets in, and as they sort of get more and more nervous, and they are attended to, they try to settle down, and then they see a gremlin or creature on the wing tearing away at the plane, and the twist is obviously it's revealed that everyone else sort of sees that this was real. In this version, it's a nervous flyer that has had past experiences that have sort of caused him some version of PTSD. And basically, a journalist finds an MP3 player with a true crime podcast that details how the plane he is currently on will disappear in its flight. And then it sort of becomes a story of him listening to the podcast, and as details are sort of released, he tries to sort of prevent the crash or the disappearance of the plane. And obviously, it comes to a conclusion. So, Julian, what were your thoughts on this episode?
Well, you say that, but I'm not sure that it does come to a conclusion. I think the first time I watched this, I liked it better because I thought this idea of the sort of true crime podcast that, is playing in real time and revealing the future was at least mildly interesting. And I thought, well, let's see where they're going with this. Adam Scott is certainly no Bill Shatner. He's also no Jonathan Lithgow. But, okay, let's see where they're going with this. And where they're going is that was it. We had no other idea besides that. Isn't that spooky? And, then you get some sort of quasi-mystical nonsense ending. That is sort of the worst ending I could possibly imagine for this. It's really a sort of admission, that this was an idea we didn't have any notion of where to go with. I think this is a train wreck. or a plane crash.
Yeah, we'll come around.
You
we'll
like
get
it better
there.
more than I do.
I do like it. Yeah, I like this idea of the sort of the information unfolding and how he reacts to the information of sort of like, listening to this podcast. I mean, he finds it by accident. If he had, it's that kind of thing of sort of fate, isn't it? Like if he hadn't have found it and hadn't bothered listening to it, like, we find out that the plane wouldn't have crashed. And then you get into the paradox of sort of like, well, in that case, does the podcast exist? And who's narrating it? Where does it come from? And there's all those kind of logistical problems we get to. But as it goes from episode to episode, or it's section to section, and it sort of goes through this information, it does. I like the fact that it sort of he tries to do things to counter it, and basically you can tell he's making things worse. And so I don't know. I liked it that they didn't just go, we're going to do a Gremlin again, 21st century. They went a different angle. So I liked it. It is one of those stories that the moment you start, at least with a Gremlin, there's a physical thing. You go, oh, that's a weird cryptid that lives in the clouds or whatever. It's silly and all this other stuff. But like with this, I say, as we come around to it, there's more and more logistical problems that I have with it. That's the crux, isn't it? This is why I think it's sort of, you say, so it's a one idea story. It's a one note, play. But I think lots of it works. I feel the tension build and all this other stuff. It's just, I have to just kind of accept that this was destined to happen. But
yeah, I don't have a problem with the destined to happen bit. I like the, deterministic universe stuff, right? In terms of time travel. So I'm not bothered by that. But, at some point you're going to have to explain what's going on and why there's this MP3 player there, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that get from the future to the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty key.
Yeah.
There's no answer for that.
No.
There's no even attempted answer for that. The podcast plays in order, right? So you have sort of a few moments where he hears what is about to happen or what has just happened, more usually. That seems sort of missed opportunities in terms of, if you accept that this is basically a sort of time travel story, it's just that what's traveled back in time is information, not a person.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities that we've seen in other stories of, seeing what's about to happen, trying to prevent it, seeing it happen anyway. And all of that, there's stuff like that here, but it's very minimized. It's not very successful. It's more focused on him and his emotional state, and isn't it weird?
Mm.
Which to me is just not especially interesting.
Well, no, I know what you mean. The thing is, when it focuses on Adam Scott, his character, it works. It's fine because it's in that moment. He's sort of like he's reacting to this podcast or the information that's being sort of relayed through it, and it's weird because it says like we have this video footage because there was these CCTV cameras on the plane and stuff, and you're like, okay, well, how did you get that? Like, I can't believe the FAA, whatever it is, have sort of released that. Like, the authorities wouldn't just release video footage from a plane crash, and where's it relayed to? And so there's things like that kind of bother me because it then says about like even internally as I'm sort of thinking back and talking through it now, I'm going, oh, this is a problem. It talks about having internal cameras on in the cockpit, and so it talks about
that are displayed to the people flying.
Yeah, which is
there
weird.
Are screen. It's like, what plane is this?
I don't know what purpose that serves, but also like it suggests that this footage is being relayed back to somewhere because it's captured. So that the podcast has obviously seen it. Well, the last footage we get is the footage of the person that takes over the plane and crashes it. So surely they must have known what happened. It shouldn't be a mystery.
I think they suggest that the footage of him causing a disturbance they have because civilians on the plane were recording it on their phones and sent it via the interwebs.
Right.
Okay. But as you say, it would make more sense that the CCTV footage is in a black box that has
Yeah.
somehow survived. How are they uploading it mid-flight? Are they connected? Are they using, Wi-Fi? If so, why did they only send that footage and not footage of them dying, basically?
Yeah.
No, I mean, none of this makes any sense. And I think the fact that it's rolled out as needed for the plot, like, I'm so bothered by the fact that the podcast goes in order, almost in real time, and then in fact the podcast ends and starts a successor podcast of like new information we've discovered. It's so awkward. It seems like, wouldn't that podcast begin with the most dramatic evidence and then kind of flash back to who was on the plane and all that stuff?
All those things. If you've ever this is obviously running off like Serial, isn't it? Which was the big one that sort of kicked it all off, really. But one of the things that podcast did, and I've listened to that and a couple of others, there'll be 8 episodes long, and 4 of those will be about the actual crime and the investigation, and the other 4 about people involved in that. And they'll be like, here's so-and-so, and we're going to do an hour's talk about their past and how they're involved and why they do this and da-da-da. And that's... So, yeah, it is a missed opportunity, because there are characters that are sort of like mentioned in this situation. There's a guy in witness protection who's been pursued by the Russian mafia and stuff. And I'm going like, all right, both sides. The podcast should really be sort of saying more about him, because he seems kind of important. They've raised him. But on the other side of that, at one point, Adam Scott's character gets up, makes a big hoo-ha, misidentifies another sort of like stereotypically Russian-looking dude for being this guy. He's wearing a tracksuit. He looks like one of the bros out of Hawkeye. Sort of like, hey bro, got the big tracksuit, gold chain, all that kind of thing. But then when the real gangster turns up and he starts getting panicky, like, he never comes back. Like, he never comes back and sort of like tries to talk to Adam Scott's character and be like, how do you know who I am? How did you know I'm in the witness protection program? Why is the mafia? How do you know the mafia is trying to kill me? Like, there isn't enough follow-up on each of these incidents, which, like you say, it's escalating, and it should really have more follow-up on some of these things. So, yeah, that becomes a bit of an issue.
It's not even clear to me 100% that he's right about the mafia guy. I mean, I don't think anyone confirms in story that he's right, let alone then confronts him, as you say.
No, a beardy guy with a ponytail comes back, and he is the real guy. But we never know, as in story, if he's actually being pursued by the mafia. We just know that there's a guy with that name on that flight. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like this is an idea. Yeah. It's just an idea. The same thing as like, well, there's an air marshal on the flight. He suspects is this weird guy he's seen, and talked to before getting on the flight that, is sort of the first passenger introduced who has him sign a magazine. But in fact, it's a woman, in a headscarf. It's like, ooh, whoa, we surprised you. This is like, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say it's a sort of like, oh, aren't we woke? You thought the air marshal was the muscular white guy, but in fact, it's a woman who's a Muslim.
But it's not even well hidden, because it spends so much time looking at her. You're like, oh, she's clearly important.
Yeah, and the question is sort of, is she going to be a terrorist or is she, not? And in fact, she's the air marshal, so it's like, oh, right, did we upset your expectations? Which I'm okay with as an idea, but it's just, there's no follow-up. There's no point to that except to say, we surprised your biased expectations. Yeah. Yeah, okay, it's just another idea.
Well, I think that's the thing that you say about this thing of ideas. I completely agree. Actually, the more you say it, I understand what you're saying now. I enjoyed this episode for what it is, but this, as you're saying, there's more issues. You talked about the guy who ends up taking over the plane and crashing it. I never fully get like his motivation. I'm not sure I understand why he did what he's done. He tells us that he is a former pilot, and so I'm like, cool, you're a former pilot. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you know why you're not now. He drinks alcohol. It's a result of too many mistakes. What does that mean? Is it a suicide mission? Is this intentional? Like, you know, why is he doing this, trying to kill everybody else? Like, it never sort of coalesces into an actual real thing. But the other problem is the whole first. You talk about him having the magazine. He meets this weird guy. He gets him to sign the magazine. It's because he's had this debate and written this article and stuff about civility, the end of civility, and how sort of, you know, and he says, well, you know, in the name of civility, I'll buy you this magazine, and he sort of, you know, that has no bearing on anything in the rest of the episode. I'm like, are we now going to have to see that his civility and his chivalry is challenged, and he's going to have to be a dick to people to get things done, or, you know, his knowledge and sort of comments around civility are going to be challenged, and or something like? Is that the point of the end of the episode where everyone kicks him to death? Like, I don't understand what that means, or if it even has a meaning, or is it just an idea they came up with?
Yeah, I think you're right that essentially that's a theme, right? You've kind of announced that's this theme of this episode.
Yeah,
you've given the audience a lens with which to view the movie or the episode, and then that lens sort of isn't clearly important, right?
It's not in focus. Yeah,
yeah, right. And I think that, like, I think about how, you know, a well done theme like Star Trek II of sort of aging and, you know, death is woven throughout, and everything relates to it. And, you know, you don't have to have everything relate to it in this kind of, you know, coherent web, but there should be some threading of that theme throughout the episode. It's not at all clear. I mean, you can kind of strain and say, well, you know, there have been these incidents on aircrafts of people misbehaving, you know, freaking out. But that's not really about civility. I mean, that's mostly about somebody suffering from PTSD, right? You know, I don't know. I mean, and you're right about, like, the person who takes over and crashes it. We don't know his motivation. We don't know his backstory. We don't know anything about it. This episode is totally content to just have him, you know, burst military style into the cockpit, you know, disable everyone, clearly be revealed as a bad guy instantly, you know, and then basically say, aha, instead of saving the ship, you know, Adam Scott has destroyed it, fulfilling the prophecy. And Adam Scott has this line where he says, he's the pilot, as if this is supposed to be like a revelation that he's the one who said goodnight, New York.
Yeah.
That's not a revelation. I mean, we get that already. That's not a twist. You've put a spotlight on it as if you think it's a clever move. It's not a clever move. There's no connecting tissue here to make that actually a clever move. There's no point where you look back and say, oh, that made sense all along. Instead, it's just a thing that happens that you then put a spotlight on it and say, see, we're clever.
Well, I think there's the thing about the guy is, I was convinced he wasn't real at one point. I was like, oh, this guy doesn't exist. Like, he's linked with the podcast. Like, he doesn't exist. Like, he's feeding Adam Scott, like, his paranoia. Like, you know, he's a part of this sort of thing, you know, because we find out that, in fact, the more I think about it, the less sense this now makes. But we find out towards the end of the episode that there is a keypad with a 4-digit code to get into the cockpit. And at the start of the episode, there's a moment where Adam Scott's character sort of says, "Oh, the flight's called 10:15, and this has happened at 10:15, and it was originally meant to leave at 9:45, but is now leaving at 10:15." So, like, 10:15, 10:15, 10:15, and then later on, even in on the MP3 player, at one point, at the moment that they get to this question around getting into the cockpit, he looks down and the timer says 10:15.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go, well, the keypad number's got to be 10:15, and it is. It turns out to be, yes, that's what it is. And you go, okay, so the guy then uses that to break in to the cockpit and to crash the plane, right? You go, okay, fine. What was his plan before that?
Yeah. Right.
Because like,
what was he doing on the flight?
What was he doing on the flight? Yeah, like, was he planning on doing this anyway? Like, was it just fortuitous that sort of Adam Scott's character sort of breaks out into this thing and helps him get into the cockpit? He also says he knows the captain flying the plane and the flight attendant crew. He points them out and says, "Oh, they're a good crew. I've flown with them several, a number of times." Blah blah blah. When he's wandering around with his little drinks bottles and stuff, no one stops him and says, "How are you doing? What are you doing on this flight? Where are you off to?" That kind of thing. Like, no one interacts with him apart from Adam Scott's character. So I was like, this guy's not real. This guy's a figment of his imagination, or he's a part of like the Twilight Zone or something. Like, I don't know. I'm still not convinced he is real by the end of the show. Like, is he the gremlin? Is that the point? I don't know.
Yeah, I do remember.
Need to know.
No, you're right. I mean, it's not really important that he knows the flight crew and he knows the pilot.
Nope.
He goes in and punches them out. There's not even a line of dialogue there. So why were we introduced to that information? I mean, this is a mystery. The mystery is, how is this plane going to go down? This is basically a murder mystery. The number one thing you have to have is that it is consistent and everyone could have figured out what really was going to happen based on the clues. In this case, none of the clues are important. None of the clues are even followed through or even make sense internally in the show's own universe. So what am I watching?
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I mean, that's the thing. Like I say, if you can't figure it out, or even like say reflect back on it and go, now that I see it, this was inevitable. Like, then yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
What is this about? What is this even about, right? Is it about civility? Is it about, I mean, look, what it's really about is this creepy feeling of, oh, I've got the MP3 player with a podcast, right? And again, it's an idea. I've heard Serial too. I love Serial. But it's like, well, what if we replace the Gremlin with a true crime podcast, but the key is it's from the future, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's an idea. Weave a narrative around that, right? That idea is not enough.
No.
And even this opening and closing narration is like, what is it even? How do we even understand this episode and its themes? It gives us no clue. The introduction is his occupation is to uncover unbiased truth. That's not exactly a reporter's job. Is this now a question about bias? Is this a question about,
But that's not even, like I say, he says he's an investigative journalist, but the piece he wrote in this article was about civility. There's no investigation there at all. It's an opinion piece.
Yes, exactly. And then at the end, he says, but in the end, he was an investigative reporter unwilling to investigate himself until it was too late. How was any of this caused by him not investigating himself?
Well, there's a whole thing about it. The only other thing that comes into it, he has several conversations with his wife over the phone, and he talks about having seen some stuff in the past, and it's caused him to have this anxiety. And he says, like, the past is in the past is basically his thing, isn't it? Like, basically things have happened in the past. You can't do anything about it. And so, don't get hung up on it because whatever. But again, like you say, that doesn't kind of tally in with this thing of saying like, oh, this thing's come from the future. He's technically in the past, according to this podcast. It's inevitable. Well, no, it's not inevitable, because if the podcast hadn't have existed there with the MP3 player, none of this would have happened. So it's, I don't know. It doesn't add up to anything, does it? Like, nothing really kind of even attempts to make that much sense.
That's the way I feel. I mean, I sort of feel like there's not really a there. I mean, there's just I mean, this whole thing, it's not even clear at the end. He washes up on an island and you sort of see the gremlin as a stuffed animal, very long shot.
Yeah.
And then all the rest of the crew is all the rest of the passengers are there, and they attack him. But the podcast says that he's the only one who didn't survive or wasn't found.
His body was never
You
found.
know,
Yeah.
this is so everyone else survived and was picked up. So does that mean? I guess that means that he wasn't found because they killed him and disposed of his body.
Yeah.
But even that is a guess. I mean, it feels like clearly not everybody survived a crash of it. And it feels like we're in some kind of like Lost style afterlife. In which case, what do we make of this story? I mean, I don't understand.
No, that bit really annoyed me or kind of confused me, because they say like they were found on this atoll, this little rocky outcrop several months later. And you go, okay, so they kind of survived. He was killed. They killed him, and they must have got rid of his body or whatever. You go, fine, ate him maybe or whatever. But it is this thing of like the way that it's filmed, the way this last bit's shot. It looks dreamlike. Like it's completely different to the rest of the episode. So again, I was like, oh, they've all died. This is like an after, or he's going to pick up and be the only one here. Like everybody else has gone or something. No, it doesn't work. I mean, you one of the things you say about the narration and these things, I did think back to not just the original 30,000 feet, but like all these other things that we watched, and there were several, I think, where it's like a one-man show. We'd have someone like trapped. There was one that I actually liked a lot more than you did, where the guy sort of trapped in a room and talking to his own reflection, or there'd be episodes like that where things had happened and it's kind of a small bottle episode or something like that. And you get this idea that those are the episodes where it's sort of like an internal conflict. A person is dealing with their inner demons, or a difficult choice, or a moral conflict, or something like that. They're always given this kind of pivot point in the episode where, like, are you a good guy or a bad guy? Are you going to do the good thing or the bad thing? Or are you going to take this redemption moment, or whatever it's going to be? There's always going to be that kind of thing, and it's this reflection and self. That they sort of have those moments. But this narration is saying, "Oh yeah, he didn't interrogate himself, or he didn't investigate himself." I'm going like this. That's the kind of thing that would happen in those episodes. But I still don't know what he had to investigate. What was the moral quandary? What was the internal conflict? Like, what is it that he was supposed to have investigated? What is that thing of self that he was supposed to have sort of come to the conclusion about at the end? It's not about civility. Is it about the past is in the past? Should he have left this alone? Like, but even then, so
he's not even an investigative reporter.
No.
It says he didn't investigate himself until it was too late. At what point in the story did he start investigating himself? I don't know.
As they were putting the boots in his face. I think that must have been the only thing.
Right, but you're right. I mean, Sterling, the classic writing thing would be, this is a metaphor,
Yeah. The other thing that really, we've talked about this, with the originals, both the Shatner one and the Lithgow one, is this thing of trying to get other people to see the gremlin, and the gremlin like disappears under the wing or whatever, and they can't see it, and everyone thinks it's crazy, right? But he does like multiple people. They only really have this once with this episode, but the grumpy guy that sat next to him is like, listen to this, and the guy's like, I'm not listening to those headphones, I might catch something. At no point does he go, I'll go get another set of headphones. Or, stewardess, can you listen to this? Am I going crazy? Or even to the crazy guy that sort of sat there going like, can you ever listen to this? Like, he tries one person on this whole plane. And then even the what's her name? The air marshal that arrests him, he should be saying, seriously, right, yeah, listen to this MP3 player, give it, just 30 seconds and have a listen. You'll understand. Like, right, calmly, like he tries it once and then doesn't bother. It infuriated me that it was like, if you have a mythical supernatural being that can shimmy around the plane, fair enough. The podcast, the MP3 player never leaves. It's always there. Having it, I don't want to put your headphones in my ears, be the only thing that's stopping people from listening to it is fucking stupid.
Yeah, and I had the same thought. And there's a little bit of dialogue where he tries to explain the airplane's going to crash, and
Yeah.
but he doesn't ever show anyone the evidence. He's got this weird evidence, and you're exactly right. I mean, again, that doesn't make sense, and you sort of think, well, does the podcast really exist? Does he, is this a sign of PTSD? Is he crazy? But unless he's crazy, it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't show this to somebody. But none of these things are ever resolved. I think about, I mean, this is just an incoherent mess from start to finish. And I think that the original Twilight Zone has those episodes. Ironically, the very first episode, Where Is Everybody, is like this, where the ending twist is just, it was all a fantasy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we criticize that as sort of like a unsatisfactory twist that a few episodes have, that basically just lets you do whatever you want for 30 minutes, and then you can pull the rug out and say, aha, he was in virtual reality, or the aliens are experimenting on him in a zoo.
So his consciousness has been uploaded into a machine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Black Mirror,
Yeah.
But, I mean, that is a more satisfying ending than this. Because, I mean, this basically does that kind of episode of just doing anything that it wants, doesn't really have to make sense, right? That would not be a very satisfying ending, but at least that would be an ending that explains, okay, he was actually dead and this is all a hallucination in his dying moments, or he's preparing for spaceflight, or whatever the fuck it is. I mean, at least then that's an excuse for, aha, that's why we could do anything. Here they want to do anything because they're shit writers, but they don't want to ever have to explain it. I mean, this is such a clusterfuck. I can't imagine who would read this script and sign on to do it. I mean, I don't know. This is one of those episodes where I think, I mean, look, it's got a few ideas. I don't mean to sound so angry about this, but I mean, I do find myself kind of wondering, like, how long would I have to go without food to agree to do this to feed myself?
I think this comes with, I think a lot of people do this. When you're approached, do you want to do a modern Twilight episode? We're doing a remake, a modernization of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. It's not the script that you're signing on to do. You're signing on to do that episode for the Twilight Zone, and you're sort of hoping it's going to be iconic. That's I think the selling point. As we've gone through this, it has highlighted a bit of a bugbear for me that I just want to sort of touch on before we sort of wrap up and stuff. It's exactly as you're saying, right? Because I'm a big fan of weird fiction, right? I love, everything from sort of like Lovecraft, and then sort of all the way obviously the monster, but then that weird stuff of sort of Aikman and all everything in between, all that kind of weird stuff, right? Chambers and all those things. One of the things that sort of like when you read these creepy sort of stories, they try and there's always the weird thing, right? They'll have the oddity or the sort of the out of this world thing, the supernatural thing, whatever it's going to be, but they'll have kind of a justification for it, or it's basically when I read bad ones, and this is a modern misunderstanding, or like an easy version of doing a weird story or a weird fiction, is that thing of going, this came out of nowhere, or like this thing of like the newspaper headline said this and it's from the future or from a different dimension or whatever, so those kinds of things. And you go, where's it from? And you go, well, that doesn't matter, that's the weird thing. And you go, no. That's never how it worked. Like, you will have the sort of the uneasiness of sort of like Robert Aikman will do something, but like genuinely he'll explain to you that they've passed through that that they've passed through time, or they've gone through another dimension, or this is sort of like they're in touch with the supernatural. Like they will give you a framework for why that they are able to see this, or why that thing is there. It's still weird and it's creepier, but instead it's not random. Do you know what I mean? And that's I think there's this thing of like randomness being inserted for weirdness. In sort of like, do you know what I mean by that? Where they go like, this thing just kind of, isn't that weird? It just happened, and you go, no, that's not. It doesn't make any narrative sense. It's still going to be part of the narrative, It can't just
Yeah, I mean, I think the classic model would be, let's say that Solaris doesn't make any sense in a sense, right? It's weird. And the explanation is alien life is weird, right? We don't know what its motivation is, right? But I mean, the same thing could happen. You could plop an alien down in the woods and people are seeing hallucinations. You don't need to explain it. The point is that alien is affecting people's minds in some way. It's weird. You don't need everything to be explained, right?
But you've got a framework, but you've added a framework.
Yeah. But my point is, that is you're in a realistic world. You're putting your finger on the rest of the world, and the characters, they've all got to act consistently and rationally. And the weird thing is dropped into this otherwise realistic world, right?
Yes.
That's how you do this. This is the classic, explanation for this. I mean, if one of the characters interacting with that alien in the woods says, I'm actually another alien, and another one says, well, I'm a leprechaun, you're nowhere. You don't know how to understand the point of this weirdness and how it affects human psyches, because they're not even all human anymore.
Well,
and you're just in some kind of weird random story.
Well, this is where this is where you sort of, like you say, there's an alien that's lost and reaching out for help, but in doing so is altering people's perception and they're having hallucinations. That's the weird tale, right?
Right.
The random.
Nothing else can be weird in that story, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The end of that story, though, is that they were all saved because a unicorn stabbed the alien to death.
Right.
And you go like, oh, sorry, where did the unicorn come from? Wow, it's crazy, isn't it? You go, no, it's crazy because it makes no sense. Like,
right.
The alien you've given me
context. It's not crazy cool. It's crazy stupid.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're right. And I think this is fundamentally how writing has shifted. It's easy for me to blame the MCU, but it's not totally at fault.
Oh, it's not just that. No. I think this is everywhere. Like
it is a generational change, and it's the sort of like, well, right, as you say, isn't this weird? Isn't this cool? That's an idea, but logically it's no different from, a character just ripping off their skin and saying they're an alien in the middle of Harry Potter, because that's an idea. Because that's cool. I mean, once you've done that, anything can happen, and it doesn't have to be believable or consistent with anything else you've presented before. And that is where this has been written from. That is the school of writing of just fuck it. It doesn't have to make sense. All of these old rules don't matter. And the end result is something that's neither emotionally affecting nor has anything to say whatsoever.
Yeah. That's it. That's the thing, isn't it? No, there's no. Yeah, you're right. It becomes completely like emotionally ineffective because you can't get a hook into it, because it to sort of follow along and then be surprised by the ending because it's just random. Yeah, it's kind of like flat. You go, okay, that's happened. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. It just.
It's like saying, the point of Watchmen is. There is, people went out as superheroes, and then also Dr. Manhattan was created. Nothing else in that story is weird or different, and those are the only two things that you have to believe, right? The rest is just, this is what would happen. Here's human psyches, depicted realistically. Here's human history depicted realistically. Imagine if, they go down to Antarctica and the Blue Beetle character, Night Owl, says, oh, by the way, I'm a magician and I'm going to turn back time, and I can alter what Ozymandias wants.
Yeah.
You'd say, what the fuck? You know, like this is not consistent with the universe you portray. There's no universe here. This is just random shit. You know, are you 8? That's a really good idea if you're 8. That's a really creative idea, 8-year-old. Pat little Jimmy on the head and say, you know, very creative. And privately think, somewhere between this and you writing your first script, you're going to learn not to do this, you know.
Yeah.
Now it's all being written by 8-year-old little Jimmys.
Yeah, I don't know where it's changed, because I do think about, you know, you and I read a lot of older, you know, say older fiction, but like, you know, and stuff. And I don't know, I just find a disconnect between one of the things we said, and I always go back to this, and the point you made when we watched the original show was the art of structural television writing. You know, keep your theme, be concise, keep to a structure, you know, bang, bang, bang. And we pointed out even in the original series, you know, especially towards the end, the sort of like season 5 and stuff, where it started to slip, or when they had longer episodes, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, this doesn't feel as tight and kind of meandering and stuff like that. Like it struggled. When they go off base, it goes off base, but when it's good, it can be really, really effective. So, yeah. No, this looks good. I like I think you're right. I like the idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really interesting idea. It just needs like reviewing and padding out to have some sort of context.
This would be a disappointing first draft. I mean, if somebody had this idea, it's a good idea. Yeah. Kudos for trying to do Nightmare 30,000 Feet in a different way, right? And not do the Gremlin, right? Kudos to try to pull in some modern stuff, right? Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, the execution is a problem, right? We need to revise this. I think at my most cynical, you know, I think this is the proof civilization is ending. You know, I know I'm a bitter old man, but you know, you read medieval literature. This is what medieval literature does. Mm-hmm. The night's going around and it's like, oh, you know, now there's a fairy castle. Now there's, you know, temperance personified who you're like, how does temperance meet with, you know, like the extremes of love in the previous scene and, you know, this worship of God and the next? How do we get this universe together? Doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter because there's not a consistent universe. It's just interested in the idea and the next episode. That's a medieval thing. That's medieval writing. It's primitive.
Yeah.
It is. You can see how that gets filtered out over time until, you know, the sort of rules and, you know, understanding that we're talking about evolves. It is literally our understanding of fiction and story is literally de-evolving in front of our eyes and in both of our lifetimes. That worries me on an existential level. You want to get all Twilight Zone about it? Like, yeah, somebody's going to go back in time and say, like, right, as the Western world was coming unglued, you could literally see it in their stories becoming more medieval.
Just simplified. It is, isn't it? It's just simplified. That's I think this happened and then this happened and then this happened. I mean, I always get back to, and you know, I'm not there. I don't know if I don't hate them, but not their biggest fan. But the two guys that make South Park, Trey Parker and
Matt Stone.
That's it. And I always remember like seeing them in an interview and they talk about and they say, if you ever use the phrase "and then this happens," then you're in you've got a problem. It should always say, because of this happens. You know, it should. You know, they say like, you know, and the Simpsons do this really, really well, where like you start with them, you know, to taking the garbage to the tip, or you know, they're taking the garbage to the dump, and there's a joke around that they're getting rid of old stuff. But the end of the episode is that Homer's become a superhuman. You can have those two, like that start point and that end point, but you're it's got to be connected because of this, because of this, because of this, because of this. Like, it can't just be and then this and then this and then this. Like, you know, it's got to have, you know, it's easy, it's perfectly fine to go there, but you've got to have that connective tissue. And I think so. They say they always, that's their motto for South Park. I always think, you know, at Simpsons at its best does that in a similar way, where you go, yeah, we're going to go weird and we're going to do something silly and stuff, but like, you're going to be able to follow it, that this has happened and sort of stuff. But again, it works in that universe, you know. I you know, yeah. So,
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of either South Park or The Simpsons, but at this point. But I agree with that. You know, I mean, if this is that sense of inevitability, right? You know, and you say, and then this happens, right? Well, what if two guys were fighting, you know, and what if they had magic powers and they're shooting fireballs at each other? And what if in the middle of the fight, aliens landed and said, in fact, we seeded all life on Earth?
Yeah.
What the fuck am I hearing, right? I mean, you know, classically, you want one, maybe two what ifs, right?
Yeah.
And everything else should be a logical, you know, extension of the elements that you've set up, right? This sense of implications, of inevitability that gives really good scripts, really good plots, you know, this power, this force as you're reading them, where they don't just feel like medieval fantasy scribbles. Yeah, and, you know, I mean, Trey Parker and Matt Stone get that idea in their own language. Yeah, this clearly does not.
No. So anyway, that is A Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, 2019. Yeah, I don't think it plays out well. The two episodes we've done from this version of the Twilight Zone have not gone down well.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything else worth viewing in this. It's disappointing.
If we wind up doing like the best of later Twilight Zone seasons, you know, there's maybe one episode that I might point out as worth salvaging from this. But it is astounding to me, you know, and I respect, you know, I mean, I know I'm trashing the writers. Look, there are smart and creative people working on this, right? You know, there's money and brain matter involved. It is interesting, having seen these two episodes and talking about them with you, how much this tries to be of the moment. And I don't mean it a dumb, like, you know, oh, I can't stand this wake messaging, you know. I mean, that's part of Jordan Peele's shtick, right? I mean, that's fine. You know, he could do it well and do it poorly, but I mean, I'm totally fine with updating. I'm totally fine with reflecting the moment, the true crime podcast, you know, are they a terrorist or an air marshal? I mean, these are all fine to include, you know, please by all means update it. But this entire run of the Twilight Zone seems very influenced by Black Mirror. And, you know, very post Black Mirror, wanting to have the kind of twist and sense of seriousness and to include these cultural moments, this updating, yet it never coheres much of a story around it, with rare exceptions. And even some of the good episodes that I would defend as okay, you know, or good or interesting, have some issue like that's sort of Black Mirror-esque, where, you know, I'm like, so how did that happen actually? Like, it's kind of works, but you know.
I often, you know, how did that happen is the question I ask when a new series of Black Mirror gets commissioned. I'm like, how did that happen? That's not right. That's
why do you hate everything British?
I don't know. No, I like British. You know, it's just, I find that Black Mirror is just. I find it played out. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the next season is going to be good. I doubt it. I think the last season we talked about it. We covered it several seasons ago. It was disappointing. It was silly. It was overblown. I
agree with all that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, I think I want Twilight Zone to exist. I want Twilight Zone to be good. I recognize it's got to be updated. I think there are good episodes of Black Mirror that kind of suggest the
Mhm.
way. Twilight Zone is something that, if there's one lesson from the original show, it's that influence of Serling.
Yes.
It's that, you have to have good scripts and a good writer. That person cannot do 30 scripts a year like Serling did. They've got to do, 8, 10,
Yeah.
at max, but give them the time to revise it and let them be Serling, right? Don't have a committee doing this that Jordan Peele had very little probably to do with most of these episodes. So I don't know.
No, I think we'll leave it there. I think we've said enough about it. Really, it's fine. Well, I'm sure we'll end up revisiting this series in another way at some point in the future. But anyway, that is our time in the Twilight Zone for now. We are still doing some other bits. We've got another sort of a final is kind of like a follow-on, another remake, I suppose, an extended adaptation of Return to Willoughby is For All Time, which was a 2000 TV movie, which we'll be covering on the next episode. And that's our sort of final thing before we get into the next season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. So anyway,
thanks for visiting this. If nothing else, these remakes kind of show different eras and how much has changed.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's worth seeing. I'm sure we'll revisit it again soon. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying this on the Patreon and everything, thank you very much. Spread the word, and support. For those that listen to the main feed, please go check out the Patreon for so much more stuff, more Twilight Zone, more stories, more talking, more discussion, so much more bonus content on there for just sort of $5 a month. You get so much stuff. Anyway, for now, Julian, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.